The gate agent's voice cut through the air like a knife, loud enough for the entire terminal to hear.
You can't just read a book here.
I'm going to ask you one last time. Move to the back of the line, or I'm calling security. Her words dripped with contempt, her finger jabbing toward a disheveled man in a worn black t-shirt and faded jeans. Keanu Reeves, calm as ever, looked up at her. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. I've already told you. I'm not moving. His tone was even, soothing even, but it held an undeniable strength that only seemed to infuriate her more. She was humiliating him in front of everyone, but no one expected what would happen next when the man they thought was powerless stood up and revealed who he really was. As we dive into this story, if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter what they look like, click that subscribe button right now and tell us where you're watching from. The terminal gleamed under the California afternoon sun, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of sleek private jets lined up on the tarmac. Inside, the space was all modern luxury marble floors, leather lounge chairs, and an atmosphere of exclusivity that made everyone inside feel like they were part of an elite club. Passengers moved with practiced ease, their designer luggage rolling smoothly behind them as they were ushered toward the gleaming Gulfstream G650 waiting outside. Some scrolled through their phones, others sipped champagne offered by the attentive ground crew. Soft jazz played in the background, mixing with the hum of quiet conversations. Among them was Keanu Reeves. He walked in quietly, almost unnoticed. Mid-50 seconds, wearing a faded black Arch Motorcycle Company t-shirt with a small hole near the collar, old Levi's that had seen better days, and scuffed Red Wing boots. His hair was long and slightly messy, his beard untrimmed. A worn leather backpack hung from one shoulder. He looked like he'd just rolled off a Harley after a long ride through the desert, which, in fact, he had. Keanu moved with a calm, unhurried confidence. He didn't try to draw attention to himself. He never did. For him, this wasn't just another trip, it was a journey to oversee a major film project he'd quietly invested millions into. But no one on board knew that yet. He preferred it that way. For now, Veronica Sharp stood near the check-in counter, clipboard in hand, her tailored navy blazer and crisp white blouse screaming authority. At 42, she'd built her career on precision, control, and an unwavering belief that appearances mattered above all else. Her sharp eyes scanned each arriving passenger, her smile warm for some, ice cold for others. She prided herself on reading people, and when Keanu walked through the door, her smile vanished. Veronica's welcoming tone shifted the moment she saw him. No warmth, no courtesy, just a clipped, dismissive, "Can I help you?" Behind Keanu, an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, entered, dressed in designer travel wear. Veronica's smile returned instantly. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson. So wonderful to see you again." Keanu glanced over his shoulder, noticing the stark difference in her tone. His expression remained calm, but his eyes, those quiet, observant eyes, reflected an awareness of what was happening. He said nothing. He rarely did. As other passengers settled into the lounge, Veronica moved through the space, checking boarding passes, ensuring everything was perfect. She stopped by the Pattersons, offering them bottled water and warm towels. "Is there anything else I can get for you before boarding?" Mrs. Patterson smiled politely, shaking her head as she pulled out her knitting. Mr. Patterson nodded toward his coffee, content. When Veronica passed Keanu, her demeanor shifted again. She glanced at his backpack resting beside his chair, her lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't offer water. She didn't offer a smile. She just walked by. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's attitude shifted based on how you looked? Share your experience in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Veronica Sharp, in her early 40s, carried herself with the precision of someone who thrived on control. Her perfectly pressed uniform, slicked back hair, and sharp gaze all screamed authority. To Veronica, appearances were everything, and her judgments were swift and unapologetic. She watched Keanu settle into one of the premium lounge chairs, and something about him didn't sit right with her. Not his clothes, not his calm, quiet demeanor. not the fact that he didn't immediately seek validation like the other passengers. In Veronica's mind, Keanu simply didn't belong. She approached him with quick, purposeful strides, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone polite but dripping with condescension. "I think you're in the wrong terminal." Keanu looked up at her, his expression calm. "I don't think so," he replied quietly. "This is my flight." Veronica's smile didn't waver, but her tone sharpened. "I don't think so. This terminal is reserved for our elite diamond members only." Nearby passengers began to notice the exchange. A woman in oversized Chanel sunglasses. Brenda leaned slightly forward, her curiosity piqued. A businessman across the way, Chad, mid-40 seconds in a Hugo Boss suit, glanced over, frowning slightly at Veronica's tone. Keanu remained composed, his gaze steady as he replied, "You might want to double-check your passenger list before making assumptions." Veronica's eyebrows arched, her irritation barely hidden. "I don't need to check anything," she said sharply. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't." The tension in the terminal thickened. Passengers exchanged glances, whispering quietly among themselves. "Why doesn't he just move if he's in the wrong place?" one muttered. "Probably trying to sneak into first class," another shrugged. Veronica crossed her arms, standing her ground. "If you don't move to the standard boarding area," she said, her voice loud enough for others to hear, "I'll have to call security." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his calm expression unwavering. "Call whoever you need to," he said softly. "But I'm not moving." Brenda gasped quietly. Chad leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Veronica, now visibly frustrated, turned to a young staff member nearby, a nervous 20-something named Emily. "Emily!" Veronica snapped. "Escort this gentleman to the standard terminal." "Now!" Emily hesitated, glancing between Keanu and Veronica. She wanted to say something to suggest checking the manifest like Keanu had mentioned, but Veronica's sharp glare froze her in place. Reluctantly, she nodded and stepped forward. Keanu shifted slightly in his seat, his calm demeanor still intact. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing," he said quietly. Veronica scoffed, waving off the warning. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. "Now get up. What would you do if someone treated you like this in public?" Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're loving this story so far, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. Veronica's tone grew sharper as she gestured toward the exit. "You don't belong here," she said again, her voice now tinged with impatience. The passengers watched in stunned silence, the tension crackling in the air. Keanu leaned back slightly, his gaze steady on Veronica. "You shouldn't make assumptions about people," he said quietly. Veronica's smirk widened. "And you shouldn't be in seats you didn't pay for." The moment hung in the air. Then Keanu, still calm, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed something quickly, then set it back down on the armrest. "You're making a mistake," he said simply. Veronica didn't listen. "We'll see about that," she muttered, gesturing again for Emily to act. The young staffer stepped closer, her hesitation palpable as the scene continued to unfold. Veronica's frustration boiled over as Keanu remained seated, his quiet confidence a stark contrast to her increasingly flustered demeanor. The tension in the terminal thickened with every passing second, drawing the attention of nearby passengers who watched with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Veronica's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time move to the standard terminal, or I will call security." Her words carried a sharp edge, her tone dripping with condescension. Keanu, calm as ever, looked up at her. "I've already told you," he said simply. "I'm not moving." His tone was even, almost soothing, but it held an undeniable strength that only infuriated Veronica further. Brenda, the woman in Chanel sunglasses, leaned toward her companion and whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Looks like he's trying to sneak into the VIP lounge for a free upgrade." Veronica seized on the comment, her smirk returning. "That's exactly what it looks like," she said, folding her arms and turning to the other passengers as if rallying support. "We have standards for a reason. Some people just don't respect them." Keanu didn't respond to the insults or the growing murmurs around him. Instead, he kept his gaze steady on Veronica, his composure a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any words. Emily, the young staffer, hesitated near the passenger manifest, her fingers trembling as she scanned the names. She was hoping to find something, anything that would help Keanu. But before she could say a word, Veronica snapped. "Emily, what are you doing?" Emily turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just checking the list. I've got this under control." Veronica interrupted sharply. "You don't need to get involved." Emily stepped back, her face flushing with embarrassment. She bit her lip, torn between doing what she knew was right and the fear of losing her job. As the tension built, a kind-looking man seated across the lounge. Chad, the businessman in the Hugo Boss suit, leaned forward. He smiled gently at Keanu. "Excuse me," he said. "Is everything all right?" Keanu turned to him, his expression softening. "I'm fine," he replied, his voice steady but grateful for the small act of kindness. "Thank you." Before Chad could say more, Veronica interjected, her tone accusatory. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage the disturbance." She turned back to Keanu, pointing a finger at him. "You're causing a scene," Chad frowned. "From where I'm sitting," he said calmly. "You're the one making a scene." Veronica's face flushed with anger, and she turned her full attention back to Keanu. "I've had enough of this," she snapped. "Either you move, or I'll make sure you're escorted out of this terminal entirely." Keanu met her gaze without flinching. "You can try," he said softly. Veronica's frustration boiled over. Her voice shook as she leaned closer to Keanu. "Why don't you just admit you're in the wrong place and stop wasting everyone's time?" Keanu remained silent, his calmness only fueling Veronica's anger. Veronica finally stepped away from Keanu, turning to carry out her other duties, though her anger simmered just beneath the surface. She moved briskly through the terminal, her polished heels clicking against the marble floor. In her hands was a tray of sparkling water and warm towels, standard offerings for elite diamond members. Keanu sat quietly in his chair, his attention focused on a worn paperback novel in his hands. Passengers chatted softly around him, the atmosphere calm until Veronica's subtle hostility began to surface. Keanu had been waiting patiently for a drink, watching as Veronica served Mr. and Mrs. Patterson first, then moved to others in the lounge. Veronica, however, made no effort to acknowledge him. The tray was nearly empty when Keanu finally spoke, his tone gentle. "Excuse me. Could I have some water, please?" Veronica paused, glancing at him with a dismissive look. "I'll get to you when I can," she said curtly, walking past without another word. Keanu's calm gaze followed her retreating figure, but he remained silent. "What would you do if you noticed this kind of behavior? Would you step in or stay quiet? Let us know in the comments below." Minutes passed. Keanu shifted in his seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. He stretched one leg slightly into the aisle, his movement unassuming. Veronica returned, tray in hand, her sharp eyes catching the small adjustment. Instead of asking Keanu to move his leg, Veronica deliberately changed her path. In an instant, she accidentally struck his leg with the corner of her tray. The tray tilted. The glasses of water tumbled forward, splashing onto Keanu's lap and the floor. Veronica gasped theatrically, her voice sharp and loud. "Watch where you're putting your legs! You've caused a mess!" Passengers turned their heads, startled by the commotion. Keanu looked up, water dripping from his worn jeans. He remained calm, his hands brushing at the wetness. "You walked into my leg," he said quietly. Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you weren't sprawled out like you owned the place, this wouldn't have happened," she snapped. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his calm gaze unwavering. "I've only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else," he replied evenly. "And if that's too much to ask, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air, a quiet, powerful rebuke. Veronica's face flushed with anger. She stepped closer, her frustration boiling over. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she hissed, her voice sharp. And then, in a shocking moment unable to contain herself, Veronica raised her hand and slapped Keanu across the face. Crack! The sound echoed through the terminal like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the passengers. Chad stood halfway up, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. Emily's hands flew to her mouth. her eyes wide with horror. Even Brenda, the nosy socialite, appeared taken aback, her previous smirk replaced by a look of genuine unease. Keanu slowly straightened. His hand rested calmly on his lap. His expression remained composed, though his eyes carried a weight that made Veronica hesitate for the first time. The terminal was silent, the tension palpable. Keanu looked up at her, his voice steady and ice-cold. "You just made the worst mistake of your life. What would you do if you were in Keanu's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe right now." Keanu looked up at Veronica, his voice steady and composed despite what had just happened. "I've been patient with you," he said, his words deliberate and firm, "but your behavior has crossed the line." Veronica's expression darkened, her jaw tightened, and her hands clenched at her sides. "Crossed the line?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You're the one who's been disruptive since you walked in here?" Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't touch his face. He didn't respond in kind. Instead, he slowly straightened his posture, his gaze fixed firmly on Veronica. His calm demeanor remained intact, even in the face of such blatant aggression. "You'll regret that," Keanu said softly, his voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the entire terminal. Veronica faltered for a moment, her confidence shaken by his unyielding composure, but she quickly recovered, scoffing loudly. "Regret it?" she sneered. "What are you going to do, call the police?" Keanu didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes, and the passengers could feel the shift in power. From across the lounge, Emily, the young staffer, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and determination. She had been quietly observing Veronica's behavior all day, her discomfort growing with every passing moment. Now, she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Discreetly, Emily stepped away from the chaos and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. When the call connected, her voice was hushed but firm. "It's Emily," she said. "We have a serious situation at the terminal. You need to get here. Now." Emily returned to her post, her face a mix of worry and determination. Veronica, oblivious to the call, stood with her arms crossed, her anger simmering but her authority clearly waning. Keanu remained seated, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Veronica's rage. Passengers continued to watch, their eyes darting between Keanu and Veronica, unsure of what would happen next. One passenger, a middle-aged woman named Carol, leaned toward Keanu, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" she asked, her concern genuine. Keanu turned to her, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine," he said softly. "Thank you." The tension in the terminal was palpable. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a jet engine outside. It was clear the situation was far from over. Keanu remained seated, his posture steady despite the water still dripping from his clothes. He looked at Veronica, his voice calm but firm. "All you had to do was treat me with respect," he said, "but you failed because of your prejudice. You assumed I didn't belong here just because of how I look." Veronica's irritation deepened. Her grip on the empty tray tightened as she leaned closer, her tone mocking. "Respect?" she scoffed. "Maybe you should earn it first. People like you don't deserve my respect." The tension in the terminal was suffocating. Passengers exchanged glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. The unspoken question lingered in the air. How far would this go? At this point, Keanu's patience, legendary though it was, began to wear thin. "You shouldn't have said that," Keanu said, his voice sharp but controlled. His words carried an unspoken weight, leaving everyone in the terminal wondering what would happen next. Veronica folded her arms, her anger still simmering. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "I've been more than patient with you. Maybe now you'll understand that actions have consequences." Keanu's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm demeanor still unbroken. "You're right," he said softly, his words deliberate. "Actions do have consequences, and you're about to find out just how true that is." For a moment, Veronica faltered. Something in Keanu's tone sent a chill down her spine, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. "I'm not afraid of your empty threats," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. You're the one who's going to regret this, not me. Veronica turned away, feigning confidence. But deep inside, unease began to creep in. She had crossed a line, and though she wouldn't admit it, she knew it. The looks from the passengers, the horrified expression on Emily's face, and Keanu's quiet composure. It all made Veronica feel as though the walls were closing in. She tried to shake it off, but her thoughts raced. What if this man isn't who I think he is? The way Keanu carried himself, the way he spoke with such calm authority, it didn't match Veronica's assumptions. For the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced her anger. Veronica's unease grew stronger as she replayed the moment in her mind. Why didn't he yell? Why didn't he fight back? Why did he say I'd regret it? Her stomach twisted as the realization hit her. She had let her prejudice and anger take over. And now, she could smell trouble coming. Veronica glanced around the terminal, hoping to find some support. But the passengers were no longer on her side. Chad glared at her, his arms crossed in silent judgment. Brenda whispered to her companion, shaking her head disapprovingly. Emily looked like she wanted to disappear, her hands trembling as she clutched the passenger manifest. Keanu, meanwhile, remained seated. His expression was calm but unreadable. He crossed his legs slowly, leaning back in his seat with a quiet confidence that made Veronica's unease grow deeper. Keanu didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't have to act out. His silence said everything Veronica didn't want to hear. The tension in the terminal thickened as Veronica tried to regain control of the situation. But no matter what she said or did, she couldn't shake the feeling that her actions would soon catch up to her. Keanu's words echoed in her mind. You're making a mistake. Unbeknownst to Veronica, Keanu had already sent a message, and his quiet response to the slap wasn't submission, it was strategy. Trouble was brewing. And Veronica was about to find out just how big of a mistake she had made. What do you think Keanu should do next? Let us know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button now. The tension in the terminal was thick, with Veronica pacing back and forth near Keanu's seat, her frustration bubbling over. Keanu remained seated, calm and composed, as though the situation wasn't affecting him at all. But deep down, Veronica could feel the weight of her actions pressing in on her. Keanu, without a word, reached for his phone. His movements were deliberate. He typed something quickly, then set the device on the armrest beside him. The gesture seemed simple, but it carried an unspoken power that made Veronica glance uneasily at the phone. "What do you think you're doing?" Veronica asked, her voice sharp. Keanu didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "You'll find out soon enough," he said softly. His words carried a weight that made Veronica's unease deepen. If you think Veronica's reaction was completely uncalled for, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The terminal fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Passengers exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. Brenda leaned toward her companion, her voice barely a whisper. "What's going on? Do you think he's someone important?" Chad, the businessman across the aisle, sat quietly, a knowing look on his face. He tapped his fingers against the armrest, his gaze fixed on Keanu as though he had pieced together something no one else had. Minutes later, the sound of rapid footsteps echoed from the main corridor. A door opened, and the terminal manager, Richard Cole, mid-50 seconds, in a crisp suit stepped out, his face pale and his expression tight. He scanned the room briefly before walking directly toward Veronica, his movements quick and deliberate. Veronica turned to him, her irritation evident. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone sharp. Richard stopped in front of her, his posture tense. "You need to step aside," he said, his voice firm but laced with discomfort. Veronica frowned, her confusion evident. "Excuse me?" she said, crossing her arms. "Why would I need to step aside? I'm handling this." Richard's gaze flicked to Keanu, then back to Veronica. "I just received a call from corporate headquarters," he said plainly. "The owner of Skyhaven Airlines is here. In this terminal." He paused, his words hitting the room like a thunderclap. "And it's him." Richard pointed directly at Keanu. Silence. The terminal erupted into gasps and murmurs. Brenda audibly inhaled, her eyes widening as she looked back and forth between Keanu and Veronica. "He owns the airline?" she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. Chad nodded knowingly, his expression calm. "I had a feeling," he muttered under his breath, as though the revelation confirmed what he'd suspected all along. Emily, standing near the boarding gate, froze in place. Relief washed over her face as the realization hit her. Keanu wasn't just another passenger. He was someone far more powerful than anyone had realized. Veronica, meanwhile, stared at Richard, her face turning an alarming shade of red. That can't be true," she stammered, her voice losing its usual sharpness. "There must be some mistake." Richard's expression remained firm. "There's no mistake, Veronica," he said quietly. "That's Keanu Reeves, and he doesn't just own Skyhaven Airlines. He's one of the largest private investors in aviation in North America." The words hung in the air. Veronica's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The confident, condescending gate agent was now a pale shadow of herself, her earlier bravado replaced by sheer panic. The tension on the aircraft, which had quietly begun boarding during the chaos, was palpable. The silence was broken only by the hum of the engines as passengers settled into their seats, the memory of the slap still fresh in their minds. Veronica stood near the galley, her arms crossed, her defiance evident despite the growing discomfort around her. Keanu had boarded quietly, taking his seat near the front of the cabin. His demeanor remained calm and composed, his posture as poised as ever. Then, without warning, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled stop. Please remain seated and prepare for descent." Passengers murmured in confusion. Chad leaned toward Keanu, whispering, "What's happening? Why are we landing?" Keanu didn't answer. His expression remained serene but unreadable. Veronica's brow furrowed, her confidence faltering as she glanced nervously toward the cockpit. The plane touched down smoothly at a private airstrip. Moments later, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class pulled up directly to the aircraft. The doors opened, and two sharply dressed assistants stepped out, both in tailored suits, their movements brisk and purposeful. They ascended the aircraft stairs with quiet authority, their presence commanding immediate attention. The moment they entered the cabin, one of them spoke, their voice warm and respectful. "Mr. Reeves, everything is ready for your review." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Veronica froze, her face draining of color as the realization hit her like a freight train. "Mr. Reeves?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The assistants ignored her, their focus entirely on Keanu. "Do you need anything before we proceed?" one of them asked, their tone deferential. Keanu stood slowly, his movements graceful and deliberate. He adjusted his worn leather jacket, his calm demeanor radiating power. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Keanu finally spoke, his voice steady and commanding. "I'm Keanu Reeves," he began, his gaze sweeping across the cabin. "I own Skyhaven Airlines, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Arch Aviation Group, one of the largest private aviation companies in the world." The cabin was silent. You could hear a pin drop. Keanu turned his attention to Veronica, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Veronica, your behavior today has been nothing short of disgraceful," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "You've humiliated a paying customer, mistreated someone based on assumptions, and tarnished the reputation of this airline." Veronica stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know." Keanu held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to. Treat me with the respect that every passenger deserves," he said firmly. "Instead, you made assumptions. You acted with prejudice, and you escalated a situation that could have been handled with basic decency." The passengers nodded in agreement, their earlier silence giving way to murmurs of support. Mr. Patterson folded his newspaper neatly, giving Keanu an approving nod. Carol, the kind woman who'd checked on Keanu earlier, smiled warmly, her face glowing with admiration. Keanu finally stood, his movements deliberate and controlled. He straightened his jacket and looked directly at Veronica, his gaze calm but commanding. "There's no mistake in your actions, Veronica," he said. "And now, There are consequences. Veronica's eyes darted around the cabin, searching for anyone to back her up. But no one came to her defense. The passengers watched silently, some with their phones discreetly raised, recording every moment. Keanu took a step closer to Veronica, his voice steady. "While you were busy judging me," he began, "you failed to do your job. Your job is to treat every passenger with respect, no matter who they are or what you assume about them." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And now, there are consequences." Keanu gestured to Richard, the terminal manager. "I want this addressed immediately," he said, "and I want to ensure that this doesn't happen again to anyone." Richard nodded, his demeanor professional. "Understood, Mr. Reeves," he said. Veronica took a step back, her mind swirling with panic. She looked toward the exit, her instincts screaming at her to leave before things got worse. But before she could make a move, Richard stepped in her path, his expression firm. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "Veronica, your actions today have proven that you are unfit for this position," he said. "Effective immediately, you are terminated." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Veronica's face crumpled, and she took a step back, her confidence completely shattered. "Please, Mr. Reeves," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean." Keanu's expression hardened. "You didn't mean to get caught," he said coldly. "But you did. And now you'll face the consequences." At that moment, two uniformed LAPD officers boarded the aircraft, their presence causing a wave of murmurs among the passengers. Veronica's face turned ashen as they approached. "Mr. Reeves," one of the officers said respectfully, "we received your report. Are you pressing charges?" Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "Yes," he said firmly. "This individual assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. I expect her to be held accountable." Veronica gasped, taking a step back. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding," she cried, her voice desperate. "I didn't mean to." The officer stepped forward, producing a pair of handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault," the officer said. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Veronica's breathing quickened as she realized there was no way out. Her gaze flicked to Keanu, who stood calm and composed, his presence a stark contrast to her unraveling demeanor. This was only the beginning of her reckoning. "What do you think should happen next? Let us know in the comments." Passengers watched in stunned silence as Veronica's hands were cuffed behind her back. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to protest. "Please, Mr. Reeves, I'm sorry," she sobbed. Keanu's expression remained impassive. "Your apology means nothing without accountability," he said quietly. "You made your choices. Now you'll face the consequences." The passengers watched silently, their eyes fixed on Veronica as she was escorted down the aisle. The once dominant gate agent was now a defeated figure, her arrogance replaced by regret and humiliation. Keanu turned back to the cabin, his voice steady as he addressed the passengers. "To everyone here, I apologize for what you had to witness today," he said. "This is not the standard of service I expect from Skyhaven Airlines. Moving forward, we will ensure that every passenger is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The cabin erupted into applause. Passengers clapped enthusiastically. Mr. Patterson gave a small cheer, while Mrs. Patterson set her knitting aside to clap politely. Keanu turned to Emily, the young staffer who had quietly supported him throughout the ordeal. "Emily," Keanu said, his tone softening, "I noticed your professionalism today. Thank you for stepping up when it mattered." Emily's eyes widened. "You'll be hearing from my office about a promotion?" Keanu added. Emily nodded quickly, her face lighting up with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," she said softly. Keanu smiled briefly before stepping toward the exit, his assistants following closely behind. The aircraft's atmosphere had shifted completely. The earlier tension was replaced by admiration and relief. Justice had been served, and Keanu had set an example that no one on that flight would forget. Do you think Veronica deserves forgiveness? Or should she face the full consequences of her actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Passengers smiled at the interaction, the warmth of the moment spreading through the cabin. Brenda, The nosy socialite, who had watched the entire ordeal with wide-eyed fascination, leaned forward in her seat. "Mr. Reeves, you're amazing!" she blurted out, her admiration shining brightly. Keanu turned toward her, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "Thank you," he replied. "But remember this moment. It's always worth standing up for what's right no matter who you are." As Keanu stepped off the aircraft, the fresh California air greeted him. The black Mercedes waited patiently, its driver holding the door open. His assistants walked beside him, briefing him on his next meeting. But Keanu's thoughts lingered on the events of the day. Later that week, Keanu sat in a sleek studio for a nationally televised interview. His demeanor was as poised as ever, his presence calm and composed. The interviewer leaned forward, clearly captivated. "Mr. Reeves, your story has gone viral. Millions of people have seen how you handled this situation. What message do you hope to send?" Keanu's gaze was steady as he answered, his voice clear and resolute. "Respect is a right, not a privilege," he said. "Everyone deserves dignity no matter how they look, where they come from, or what others assume about them. True leadership is about setting that standard and ensuring it's upheld." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "And what would you say to those who face similar challenges but don't have the platform you do?" Keanu's expression softened. "I'd say that strength comes from within," he replied. "Even when you feel invisible, remember your worth. You don't need a title or wealth to demand respect. You just need to stand firm in who you are." A few weeks later, Keanu boarded another Skyhaven Airlines flight. This time, he was greeted by a different crew. The energy was warm, welcoming, and professional. The lead flight attendant, a kind woman named Sarah, greeted him with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reeves. It's an honor to have you flying with us today." Keanu returned the smile as he settled into his seat. The atmosphere felt lighter. The service was impeccable. But more importantly, it was filled with respect. As he gazed out the window, watching the runway blur into the sky, a sense of peace washed over him. The events of that day had left a lasting impact not just on the passengers and crew who had witnessed it, but on everyone who had seen the story unfold. Keanu knew that his actions had turned an injustice into a lesson, one that would ripple far beyond that single flight. He smiled, knowing that sometimes the most powerful victories weren't about winning. They were about inspiring change. As the passengers settled into their seats, Keanu quietly reached for his phone. In the aftermath of what had unfolded, he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about changing a system that allowed prejudice and assumptions to thrive. As the jet climbed higher into the clouds, Keanu settled into his seat at the front of the cabin. The window beside him framed a breathtaking view of the horizon, the world below fading into a sea of blue and white. He gazed out at the endless sky, a sense of peace washing over him. This wasn't just about confronting prejudice or asserting his authority. It was about turning a moment of humiliation into a powerful lesson, one that would ripple far beyond this single flight. Keanu smiled to himself, his reflection faintly visible in the window. He knew this was just the beginning. With every decision, every policy, and every act of leadership, he was shaping a future where respect and kindness were the standard, not the exception. In a public statement released shortly after the flight, Keanu spoke directly to the world. His words carried a message that resonated far beyond the confines of the aircraft. "Luxury isn't about appearances," he said in a heartfelt video that quickly went viral. "It's about the experience we create for everyone. True success is measured not by what you can afford, but by how you treat others. This is why I'm implementing new policies across Skyhaven Airlines to ensure that every passenger, no matter who they are, feels valued and respected." The statement sparked conversations across social media. People applauded Keanu's leadership and his commitment to change. Hashtags like "respect above all" and "Keanu's vision" trended for days, inspiring others to reflect on their own behavior and biases. The plane soared higher, the engines humming softly as it moved toward its destination. And Keanu, seated at the helm of his vision, felt a quiet triumph that no turbulence could ever shake. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with people around you. Because kindness, it costs nothing, but it changes everything.